Oh, hello, listeners. Just a note before we begin this week's episode. We love making Polity Matters, and we've enjoyed our first year so much. We're so glad to be in season 2, and we're going to continue to make Polity Matters as long as you keep listening to it, and, well, maybe even when you eventually stop. But it does cost a little bit for us to produce this podcast. We have some monthly costs, like hosting and recording. If Polity Matters has been a benefit to you, and honestly, even if it hasn't, would you consider helping us out? Go to buymeacoffee.com/politymatters. You can find the link in the show notes, and there you can donate, or you can get set up with the exclusive Polity Matters Blue Brick membership. We aren't trying to make a living off of this podcast, but we do need to cover some of our small monthly costs. Anything over our expenses will go to purchasing swag and maybe some giveaways across the course of the year. So we'd appreciate any support you can give us. Thanks so much. Be sure to stay tuned for exclusive offers that might come through that site, other ways that we may try to support some of our work. We want to make this valuable for you and give you as much as we can. Thanks so much for being a Polity Matters listener. We couldn't do this without you. Now, on to the show. Well, hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Ben Ratliff, and I'm joined, as always, by Jared Nelson and Scott Edberg. And today we are back in the BCO. To be honest, we're recording so early in the year, we don't know what came just before this. It's probably that we just finished GA season. You've been listening to some special episodes. We've probably been a little all over the place. Maybe you've even heard some live commentary from General Assembly. But no matter the case, we are spending some time in the Book of Church Order again. The last time we were together in the BCO, we covered chapter 14 on the General Assembly just before we got into General Assembly season and assembling the necessary components to attend in Richmond in June. And now we are back into the beloved blue brick. Guys, how are y'all? Tell me just, I know you're excited, but how excited are you to be back in the BCO?
After my long summer vacation, when I went to Michigan and enjoyed some time with the family, I was reflecting there about how much I miss this great blue brick. And so now that we've had a long summer, a long hot summer away from it, I'm glad to jump back in.
Especially after that recent news that happened just before this episode dropped.
That was just unreal. I cannot believe it.
That will really shake up the future of the denomination.
Yes,
it will. It will. Well, in any case, just thinking maybe that we will have to move some work to some ecclesiastical commissions based on that news we've received. Let's get into BCO 15, starting in chapter 1. And you know, it's been a while since we've done this, y'all. I'm just going to read it like audiobook style. If that's all you come for, don't forget that there's chapter markers, and you can just skip to the beginning of each section in your podcast player and hear the paragraphs read. You can skip the commentary and go on to the next section if that is your style. But to start with, ecclesiastical commissions 15:1, a commission differs from an ordinary committee in that while a committee is appointed to examine, consider, and report, a commission is authorized to deliberate upon and conclude the business referred to it. A commission shall keep a full record of its proceedings, which shall be submitted to the court appointing it. Upon such submission, this record shall be entered on the minutes of the court appointing, the date of the submission being the date of the meeting of the court for filing requirements under the rules of discipline, with exception of the notification dates of BCO 42.4 and 43.3. The effective date of dismissal of a commission of session or presbytery shall not be before the time allowed for the filing of a complaint or appeal against that commission's decision has expired. Any complaint or appeal so timely filed shall be adjudicated by that commission until the matter is settled by that commission or a higher court. When a commission is appointed to serve as an interim session, its actions are the actions of a session, not of a presbytery. Every commission of a presbytery or session must submit complete minutes and a report of its activities at least once annually to the court which commissioned it. There's a couple things going on here, and some of this is new information for us. We at least have the basic definition of a commission, and then some details about its reporting requirements, and then a statement about commissions functioning as sessions. as appointed by a presbytery. One of you guys want to start us off? We were just talking before we hit record about how this is a classic credentialing question for an ordinand or a licentiate, is what's the difference between a committee and a commission? And the beginning of 15.1 is where you go for it. But what's significant about this, guys? Y'all help us out.
Well, it's important to know what the difference is, because a committee, if you're ever put onto one, you have to know what it is that you're supposed to do. And basically, if you're on a committee, you're supposed to gather information and give a report to the presbytery so they know what to do. Whereas a commission, you are given the business and you conclude it. You get to the end, you make the action, you do everything that's required for that, and just tell them what you did rather than give them a report and tell them what they might do. And some of this has been clarified recently, why this paragraph is so much longer. If you have an old BCO, you didn't hear half of that stuff because it needed to be clarified, because it used to be judicial commissions at the presbytery level would present their verdict and you would vote it up or down. And you're going to get a little bit more into that in the third paragraph. But this basically clarifies that there still is an ability to appeal the verdict or the action of the presbytery, even though it's acting for the entire presbytery when it does it. And so that's why some of these changes have been made as of the 50th General Assembly.
And they were good changes, in my opinion. They made it more consistent, where you understood the language at least a little clearer. It was kind of odd that our standing judicial commission doesn't require a vote unless there's a minority report coming from it. And then you go back to presbytery, but when you have a judicial commission there, you have to vote it. I think it just shores up consistency. And that was what I think the purpose of it was. And so we have examples of both committees and commissions, and most people know them. We have committees that perhaps the easiest is to conceptualize at the assembly level. You think of our ad hoc committees that study various things. They come, they study a topic, and then they later at the next assembly report on that topic. And sometimes they make recommendations concerning things that the PCA should do, whether that's a BCO revision or some other action. You think of a standing committees or M&A, MTW, RUF, investigative committees. You think of that at presbytery levels. If there's been a 31-2 submitted to the presbytery, there might be a committee formed. And then a commission, as Jared said, is one that actually acts on behalf of the presbytery and does the work itself. And you think of the standing judicial commission that we have, and maybe a presbytery commission, ordination commissions. You think of when the presbytery comes in some fashion to your church to ordain or install a minister. It's typically by way of commission, where they are representing, they are the presbytery there to ordain you. And then, as Jared said, and Ben, temporary forms of government that stand in lieu in waiting for a more permanent established one.
Well, some of that moves us along into the second section. Well, I take it back. Let me back up a little bit. We this matter of a commission being appointed to serve as an interim session, it's significant, right? Because I can't hear.
Microphone down.
Hold my headphones out. I'm glad we're editing this thing. I don't even know if y'all can hear me.
I can hear you.
What?
Now I'm back. I crossed my legs under the table and yanked this thing out. Now I'm debating whether I'm gonna. Well, I should say this or not. Well, I don't know where the listeners are at.
Session?
Yeah, by the interim session. Thank you. What I've heard people say before regarding an interim session. So a session like this at the end of the first paragraph is a commission of the presbytery that's overseeing a mission church of the presbytery. And I have heard men speak before and say, well, you can't go back on a session can't go back on the action of a interim session's decision, because that's the action of the presbytery, because it's a commission of presbytery, as if to somehow give the action of an interim session or a provisional session more weight or power, as it were, when they make decisions. But this is what this is here for, right? Is to establish, hey, when an interim session, even though it is a commission of presbytery, if it does something, its actions are not the actions of the presbytery; they're the actions of the session of that church, and that came in to play in ways that I didn't expect. I'm being very vague, hopefully vague enough to still make sense, but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, there's two parts there. What you're talking about there is, it says the actions of that interim session are the actions of a session and not a presbytery. So it's still subject to review of that
Oh yeah,
presbytery.
that's good.
And something else that makes that clear is that they have to submit their complete minutes, because every commission of a presbytery or a session must submit complete minutes and a report of its activities at least annually. So it's still going to be reviewed by the presbytery to say, what did you guys do? And if you didn't do it right, then you're going to get cited.
And I suppose that would be a big difference between a commission that's acting as an interim session versus a commission that's acting in any other way, is that their minutes are actually reviewed in the style of review of session records and can be cited and sent back for changes or whatever needs to happen. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a great point. Well, we've already kind of alluded to it. Let's get into 15.2. There's a couple paragraphs there. We'll just work our way through. 15.2 starts, among the matters that may be properly executed by commissions are the taking of the testimony in judicial cases, the ordination of ministers, the installation of ministers, the visitation of portions of the church affected with disorder, and the organization of new churches. So some of y'all may have seen some of these. If you're members in a church, if you're officers in a church, you're familiar with several of these. Maybe the ones especially the ordination of ministers and the installation of ministers. Those services, which are actually meetings of the Presbytery Commission taking action in these particular cases. I know Scott has said it before, and I'd echo his sentiment. They're some of my favorite services to be a part of in the church, and same thing regarding the installation of ruling elders and deacons. They're encouraging times of the growth of the church and the expansion of the kingdom, and seeing the Lord raise up new men to serve in different ways. But that's not just what these commissions are appointed to do. Have you guys seen any of these others in play in your presbyteries? It's been a while since I've seen the organization of a new church.
Well, the first that I would say is in regards to installation ordination, it clarifies something that once that service happens, they are installed.
Yeah.
It's not ratified at the next presbytery. So that's part of the reason that you would do a commission like this, is once they're installed, once that service has happened, you can have the Lord's Supper. You can do all these things. They're rightfully installed. They're rightfully there. And so that action is the action of the presbytery. I would think that some of these other functions are things that don't happen quite as often, other than the organization of new churches. That would be more of almost like the ordination of the church, kind of functioning in a similar way. I've never seen the visitation of portions of the church affected with disorder. I don't even know what form that would take.
I would imagine if a commission shows up on your doorstep saying, "Hey, we're here to visit you, this portion of the church," you should be concerned, be worried. Just take it as an encouragement that you've never been visited by one of these or seen it happen.
I could see it pop. I could see the application, like at least theoretically, of how it could work. If there's a massive issue that's blowing up in a local church, you might commission a group of TEs and REs from the presbytery to try to mitigate. Say if a church is having strife with the presbytery itself, instead of sending the whole presbytery to mitigate that issue with the local session and congregation, you might commission a group to be the facilitators of trying to calm the storm. So I could perhaps conceptualize, I've never seen it, but I could see a situation where you might want to send in a plurality of elders that do act on behalf of the presbytery as the presbytery.
In that sense, we might say that this would be a wise provision to consider more often. I'm sure y'all's presbyteries are similar. We have something called a church care committee, and they're usually handed the hard things, right? Congregational care, pastoral care, whatever they may be called, shepherding committees in some places. But it might be wise, instead of the church care bringing a recommendation to the floor of the presbytery and the whole body deliberating on the issue, it seems like it could be wise to raise up these types of commissions to go and actually just deal with it. It keeps private matters from being too public, right? If there's sensitive information taking place. Yeah, but what else?
Yeah, well, yeah, and you're thinking about the time frame. Presbyteries meet very slowly, and if you're having a pretty substantial blow up or a fractured relationship between the church and the presbytery, you might want that to be resolved a little quicker than in a quarter from now. or to have to call a meeting. Some of our jurisdictions are so large that it'd be difficult. And so you might want to do it in that way too.
I still don't know why that would need to be a commission rather than a committee. So I don't know how often this is actually used as a commission.
Yeah, I guess what actions would they do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Almquist and Morton don't really talk about it. So
I mean, I suppose if
Mm.
you have a very significant issue, you might have a situation in which a man's call would be dissolved or a church might be dissolved, if it's really bad. But again, those types of things, in my opinion, as much as they're able, should come before the whole body. I don't know if this might get into the question that one of y'all typed in here is are there limits to what a commission can do? I think my first response, and I know there's some kind of inquiry that was posed at a point, but there's certainly matters of wisdom concerned with what a commission should be given to do. There's some situations in which you want the whole body to deliberate on a matter. If it's a matter of a man's call or a church's existence, things of substance like this may be best for the whole presbytery to be involved. But what else related to commissions and their abilities to perform actions? Are there limits to what a commission can be given to do?
Yeah, what's helpful to note here is the 15-2 says the word may, what they may take up. And so those are just recommendations. It's not exhaustive. And Almquist talks about that in his commentary, that these are just examples of what you can take up, but you could take up any host of things. And so it's a good reminder that in the BCO, shalls and wills are different than mays and shoulds. Mays and shoulds are encouraged, strongly encouraged, but not required. Whereas shall and will is something you must do. If it says if you should do this, it's just good encouragement to do it, strong encouragement. But here it's just may. And so I would think that as Ben was saying, the wisdom here is how do you apply it? You could allow a commission to do anything, but should you allow a commission to do everything is obviously probably not too wise.
You could wind up with a delegated presbytery meeting if you really wanted to. We designate these 6 or 7 men to get together and take care of everything that we had on the docket for this next meeting.
Well, it's interesting, like how different presbyteries function. Some presbyteries trust their committees more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes presbyteries can be really quick if you trust your committees because they'll get all your work done for you. And then they just bring their recommendations to the floor and everything gets passed quickly. Presbyteries that have less authority vested in their committees often have to do some of the committee's work on the floor of presbytery. And sometimes that can get clunky. And so there even committees can have perhaps ranging authorities in a presbytery depending how the presbytery uses them.
The second part of 15:2 continues on. Every commission appointed by presbytery shall consist of at least 2 teaching elders and 2 ruling elders, and the quorum shall be one more than half its membership unless otherwise determined by the presbytery. However, should a presbytery clothe the commission with judicial powers and authority to conduct judicial process, or with power to ordain or install a teaching elder of the gospel, the quorum of such commission shall not be less than 2 teaching elders and 2 ruling elders. The quorum for a commission appointed as an interim session need not conform to the requirements of a judicial commission, but only to those of a session in BCO 12:1. When the ordination of a minister is committed to a commission, the presbytery itself shall conduct the previous examination. So dealing with matters of quorum and membership, there's really, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I think I see 3 designations here. That just general commission is 2 and 2, with more than half being the quorum. But if it's a judicial commission or an ordination installation commission, it's got to be the quorum is 2 and 2 entirely. So I don't know about y'all, just speaking of that second one there, in our presbytery, we require an installation or ordination commission to be 3 and 3 in order to have the flexibility to make sure they meet that 2 and 2 quorum requirement. Flexibility is good, right? People get sick. You never know what's going to happen. Otherwise, you have to bring the report back like you would a committee and have the guy, technically not approved for install until the presbytery's met. But
yeah, I think the template form for commission for installing or ordaining a minister is 3 and 3 on the actual form.
Okay.
And so though our Constitution says 2 and 2, it seems like the historical practice is 3 and 3.
It does seem to have an implied limitation here on commissions, when it says when the ordination of a minister is committed to a commission, the presbytery itself shall conduct the previous examination. That you can't just have a commission do everything, do the exam, all of the exams, do all of the ordaining, so that you have somebody that has come through presbytery and nobody in the broader presbytery has had any opportunity to ask them any questions in any forum.
That's good.
What if you have two commissions, like an examining commission and then an ordaining commission? Does that fulfill this statute?
You can be the test case for the next SJC trial.
CCB. I have a CCB inquiry for the General Assembly. I want to know.
Just curiosity.
Wasting people's time.
I think Jared and I should probably know the answer to that question.
We don't like to do anything through a commission for our candidates and credentials because we like the presbytery to hear on the floor and have an opportunity to ask questions. So larger presbyteries probably deal with this more.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about typically a presbytery when they're unable to fill committee slots, AC, or like the COCs and things of that nature? I've seen various approaches. Is it better to create a commission to fill those vacancies, or is it permissible to empower a moderator to fill those vacancies?
I think that's one of our friend's soapboxes, that you can't just have the moderator do it. You have to have some sort of commission with more than one person do it. So you have to have some sort of commission that's more than one person.
Which would be 4 people at minimum.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there are some presbyteries that just have the clerk and the moderator together do it.
Good thing I'm not on RPR, guys. I'm just kidding. I'm just curious about the idea.
As we're about to transition, 15.3 starts a whole thing on judicial matters, but as we're considering the difference between committees and commissions, can y'all think, are there any thoughts y'all have on the benefit of a committee over a commission in particular situations? I mean, we've talked a lot about what commissions can do, but are there points in which you may choose one over the other for a particular purpose?
I think the next section will show us one of those, which is in judicial matters. If they conclude a matter and you don't like it, too bad, you did it. You can't really question it other than appeal and take it up to another level. So commission, you really have to trust that commission. Committee, if you want to review the work and you want to have a say in it, and then you need to do it as a committee.
Yeah, but I think even getting into 15.3 with that idea that it's kind of hard to exercise a judicial process as an entire court. And so even if you do appoint a judicial committee instead of a commission, you're dealing with an issue of the people that are voting on the issue don't have full understanding of the issue. They've not read through all of the minutes. They've not read through all the correspondences. They weren't there for the witness testimonies, et cetera, et cetera. And so there becomes a point where a commission is almost a necessity in those kind of circumstances, because the court itself, as large as it can be, won't have the tools in order to actually complete that work effectively. And so I think in those kind of circumstances, as we get into 15.3, I think that's why we need commissions. And secondly, commissions also help expedite process, or not process in the judicial sense, but just processes as it relates to things that just need to get done quicker, ordinations, installations. It would really make certain things clunky, unnecessarily burdensome. And so I think commissions for those two ideas are helpful. Unless you don't trust your people, I guess. If you don't trust your presbytery, maybe that's the opposite.
Yeah, I thought about that when you said that earlier about trusting your committees and commissions. If there's a good culture of trust in the presbytery, it does make a lot of this easier. If there's more suspicion, not so quick. Our standing rules in our presbytery have a couple of places where certain permanent committees are allowed to take action as a commission in certain circumstances. One of them is the committee that I'm chairing right now, the Credentials Committee. So if we have a properly called meeting and a full quorum of our committee present, we're allowed to function as a commission and give permission to a already ordained teaching elder to move to the field ahead of the presbytery meeting in which he is officially transferred. Now, I can't remember the last time we exercised this, and I actually have just interacted with a guy recently and encouraged him not to ask us to exercise this, because there's that, even in our standing rules, there's a qualifier. You do this understanding that the presbytery can still say no. So if they're unsatisfied with his transfer exam or with his credentials in some way, they could still say no, and he'd have to figure out what to do. I've never seen that happen before. I've always, anytime I've seen a guy move early with permission, he's been received and never had to leave. But you always run that risk. You never know what a presbytery is going to feel like. You never know what side of the bed the men woke up on, or if they had a fight with their wife, or how they're feeling that morning. I shouldn't make it seem so trivial, but we are sinful men, and we're fickle sometimes, and you never know what might happen in a presbytery meeting.
Yeah, the difficulty with something like that is that it really binds the presbytery.
Yeah, for real.
And it can be a situation where the guy's not bad, but perhaps that church just went through a weird blow up or something where do they need another paedo communionist? A paedo communionist just blew up the church, and the credential committee says yes. Commissioning that kind of work just sets up the presbytery for, in certain circumstances, difficulty.
Yeah. Do y'all know of other types of committees that have commission powers in certain circumstances? I know that our RUF committee has them, but I can't remember the specific parameters off the top of my head. It has something to do with approving calls if there's changes made.
Nope. We have no commission and standing for any of our committees.
Usually you go check the presbytery standing rules if you're interested to know in your own location, for any of you listeners, and you can see they're usually highly qualified powers. It's under very particular circumstances that is allowed to take place. Well, 15.3, we're really getting into it. Presbytery as a whole may hear a case with or without process, a reference, an appeal, a complaint, a BCO 45 proceeding, or a request to assume original jurisdiction properly before it. Or it may, of its own motion, commit such a case to a commission. Such a commission shall be appointed by the presbytery from its members, other than members of the session of the church from which the case comes up. The commission shall try the case in the manner presented by the rules of discipline, and shall submit to the presbytery a full statement of the case and the judgment rendered. The judgment of the commission shall be the decision of the presbytery, and the statement of the case and judgment printed in its minutes. There's some changes in here. Maybe y'all want to talk about, you guys are more familiar with it, I think, than I am, about the significance of these changes and what they've affected in the long run.
Yeah, it used to be that certain judicial commissions would almost act like a commission, except at the very end, you had to approve their actions up or down without debate. At least that's how we did it in Ascension. And so then it became, why are we asked to approve or not approve these when we can't ask real probing questions about it? And we don't know all the information. And so I think in the end, this is a good provision that either you're going to trust that commission and then they can appeal it, or you don't trust that commission and you make it a committee, perhaps to do some of the work and then try it before the entire presbytery, if the entire presbytery wants to have an opinion on something. So either do it as a presbytery or do it as a commission. The in between doesn't really work and doesn't really, then you really never should have had a committee or a commission set up in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask Scott what he thought, but he's disappeared again, as he does. One thing, and again, I said I'm not so familiar with this paragraph. Hey, man, this is, did y'all clarify for me? This just was updated this last General Assembly, right? Just finally approved and added. So previous to this, I've had guys complain to me about this kind of thing, that they wish they could hear more information on a case before approving it at presbytery. Because isn't this where it used to say that if the presbytery said no, they could give it back? Is that how it used to work? I'm getting blank stares. I must not make any sense.
Then the whole presbytery basically would have to take it up.
Oh, that's what it was. That's what. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Not give it back. some of this stuff is weird, right? Like if same kind of thing with overtures, if they recommend no and we say no, how does it work? And oh no, he got up and left. I never know what to do when my guys are not sitting in front of their cameras. I feel lost and alone and don't know how to handle things. I've been rambling. Maybe I didn't make any sense. Scott, do you have any thoughts on 15.3 that Jared didn't mention, or that I didn't, mix up and confuse for everybody?
Yeah, so I think while we often use, when we think of commissions in light of the rules of discipline, we just think of cases of process. But the presbytery or the higher court also deals with appeals, complaints, and other proceeding references, those kind of rules of discipline issues. And so, say there's a trial in your local church, you might have a person in your church appeal that to the presbytery. The whole presbytery need not take it up. The presbytery can appoint a commission in order to address that appeal. And so we tend to think of a judicial commission focusing on cases of process or cases without process. But a commission of the presbytery can also answer references, appeals, and complaints. And so it might be a little daunting when you think of an appeal coming before your whole presbytery, but it need not be that laborious. You can appoint a commission to handle the appeal, and it's the same process as outlined with cases of process as well.
Well, as we keep moving into 15.4, we're going to start hearing some words we've talked about in the past. And we've already referred to this, that we could spend much time on all of this. But we'll try to get through it as expeditiously as we possibly can. 15.4, the General Assembly shall elect a standing judicial commission to which it shall commit all matters governed by the rules of discipline, except for the annual review of presbytery records, which may come before the Assembly. This commission shall consist of 24 members divided into 4 classes of 3 teaching elders and 3 ruling elders in each class. Each class shall serve a 4-year term, and each subsequent assembly shall declare the standing judicial commission as a whole to be its commission. Nominations and vacancies shall be filled according to BCO 14.1, with nominations allowed from the floor. No person may be elected if there's already a member of the commission from the same presbytery, but if a person is elected and changes presbytery, he may continue to serve his full term. No person may serve concurrently on the GA's standing judicial commission and any of the GA's permanent committees. So just to keep track with why this is here, we've talked about commissions related to the presbytery and how they function, and now we're moving into a commission that's connected to the General Assembly as a whole. Guys, I don't know if there's much to say here. We've talked about the SJC a little bit as we've kind of worked through some of the General Assembly prep, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong. It certainly came up when we were in chapter 14 talking about the General Assembly as a whole. What is here for us to observe?
Well, since we've been talking about a commission, how it's different, what we need to understand is the Standing Judicial Commission is a commission.
Yeah.
And what they do is what the General Assembly has done. And so if they do a verdict that we don't like, most of the time we can't do anything about it. Now, there's a provision we're going to get into in the next section about one exception to that. But generally speaking, there really needs to be a good effort to make sure that the people that you put on the Standing Judicial Commission are people that you trust, because these are going to be people that apply our rules of discipline on judicial cases that come before them. And what they do is what we do. And we can't really change that in any sort of way. One of the things that they, when they set this up, a provision they made in this was that there's not more than one person from a presbytery that's serving. So no presbytery gets more than one representative on the Standing Judicial Commission, to try to make sure that it's not regionalized or just one presbytery takes over the Standing Judicial Commission. So it tries to be fair in that way. But this is why this is usually the one that most people are paying attention to when it comes up in nominating committee, in the meetings or on the floor. These are the ones that you're really looking at, saying who would be the best qualified to be a judge in these matters.
One of y'all put this in here. It was the SJC was only added in 1988. Does that mean that prior to 1988, so for 15 or 16 years, that cases were just tried as a whole for the General Assembly? Or would they have given it to committees or special or certain commissions that they would establish as case by case basis?
I think you'd have certain committees that would handle those and then present a report at the end of the General Assembly. This standardized it so that we knew as the General Assembly was getting larger, we're going to have rules that govern it every single time. We're going to know who these people are that are acting as judges are, rather than just appointed at that particular GA.
And in the history, I mean, couldn't things get kind of messy on the floor of GA because it was relegated to a committee and the unfinished work of a committee kind of comes and spills over. And so I think it cleans it up quite a bit. Though the labors of the SJC are large these days. I think I was talking to John Bice, and he was telling me when I was in Providence Presbytery that the briefs that he receives for any case are 1,000 to 1,200 pages of reading. And so just and that's before you do all the actual work. That's just getting caught up, getting caught up on what has happened in that presbytery. And then you have to take that information after you've read all of it and then meet with the people and hear the case. And so it's a substantial work. I don't know if I want to be on the SJC ever. I mean, that's just too much work for me.
Well,
I want
Scott,
the
it's not
low-hanging
up to
fruit
you.
of NomCom. Give me NomCom. I don't want to be on the SJC.
We might just choose to put you up there, even if you don't want to be. I was thinking too, having a standing commission like this, not that we want to have only the same men serving all the time, but having these rounds and classes of men that serve, and there are a lot of men that will serve multiple terms and will come back again later and serve again. It develops a set of men in our denomination that know what they're doing. They gain so much experience with these cases, and we've talked to some of them on this show before, right? Fred and Steve and there's somebody else I'm thinking of.
Howie.
Yeah, Howie. We've had Howie on. These guys are so knowledgeable, and part of it is because they've had to read through these long briefs and get caught up, and they have to know what's going on in order to deal with these matters. So you might not have a choice one day, Scott. You might just be knowledgeable enough that you're the only option.
I hope not.
Yeah,
I really do hope not. The Standing Judicial Commission, I think it's been helpful over the years, and I think when you're thinking about how the polls of the PCA are responding to it, I think I do agree with Brian Chappell when he talks about how the SJC typically rises above the partisanship of the PCA. And I think what he means by that, at least partially, is that very few people are truly happy often with the SJC decisions. And every decision, makes someone uncomfortable. And perhaps that's a good place to be. If everyone on one side of the PCA was happy with every decision made, it would probably reveal a more partisan SJC. But what we have has kind of risen above the partisanship of the PCA.
Well, and you even see that in the votes, right? Because we get to see which members voted in which direction on all these SJC decisions, and not that we would assign, one side of the PCA or the other to individual members of the commission. But if you look through those, you'll see men that you might think of in one way, voting fairly often in the same direction as somebody else who might be thought of as a different side of the PCA. It'd be surprising, I think, to a lot of folks to go and look at who votes together. And it may actually help kind of level the playing field, as it were, and see that the sides are mostly just loud on Twitter and in front of microphones. But when it comes to SJC, we have a lot of common ground, even if the rest of us disagree with everything they did. Okay, 15.5 is scary, but we're going to jump in. We're just going to go with the first part. In the cases submitted to it, the SJC shall have the judicial powers and be governed by the judicial procedures of the General Assembly. The decision of the SJC shall be the final decision of the GA, except as set forth below, to which there may be no complaint or appeal. Members of the SJC may file concurring or dissenting opinions or a minority report as set forth in C below. The General Assembly may direct the Standing Judicial Commission to retry a case if upon the review of its minutes exceptions are taken with respect to that case. Somebody interpret the tongues I just uttered, and then we'll keep going.
That last sentence, well, first, this is showing that the decision of the Standing Judicial Commission is final. It is the decision of the General Assembly. It's what the General Assembly did. Now, it's setting up there may be a case in which there's division within the SJC that an issue comes to the General Assembly, and this is how it would happen. That last sentence there, though, I'll be a little controversial here. I don't think anybody knows what it means or how it would happen. The General Assembly may direct the Standing Judicial Commission to retry a case if, upon review of its minutes, exceptions are taken with respect to that case. This actually was attempted once about a decade ago with federal vision cases, especially with the Lightheart case. And when it came through, there in fact was somebody on the CCB who noted, "Hey, we review their minutes, and so if we have an issue during the CCB report, we can say they need to reconsider this, retry it, whatever." And the answer that came back, that was the ruling of the chair and of the understanding of others on the CCB, that no, they can't really talk about the substance. They just review for making sure the form was done right and things like that. And they can't really, from CCB, tell them to retry a case. So that was the ruling then. What's interesting is the person who was making the case that CCB could do that is now on the SJC. So I wonder if his opinion has changed or not. But that last line, I think it's Coffin at least said, well, actually, the way that the General Assembly can change something is just in the minority report, which is set out below. And in a sense, that sentence may not mean anything.
And this happened maybe a couple years ago also with the 31-2s and things of that nature with Greg Johnson, no? Where the SJC took up, I don't know if it was an appeal. I think it may have been an appeal. And the CCB somebody tried to do some maneuvering in order to get that before the assembly itself to reconsider. But I can't remember the details of that.
Again, the CCB has tried a couple times and it's never happened. And they basically said, I don't think we can do this.
It keeps going and B. In each case, the SJC shall issue a summary of the facts, a statement of the issues, its judgment and its reasoning, together with any concurring or dissenting opinions, all of which shall be entered on the minutes of the GA and shall be reported by the stated clerk to the next General Assembly. The judgment shall be effective from the time of its announcement to the parties. So just stating here briefly that there's a report submitted to the GA of what the SJC has done. The judgment is effective from the time of its announcement to the parties in the case, not from the time of the General Assembly when it's reported. So if something happens in between GAs, it's effective. You don't have to wait till the next year. Keep going into C. Oh man, this is where you guys probably want to pull your BCOs out and listen, read along as I read, because even I'm having trouble keeping up with this, and it's right in front of me. C1. If within 24 hours of the time of adjournment of an SJC meeting at which a final decision was rendered in a case, at least 1/3 of the voting members of the commission file written notice of their intention to file a minority decision with the stated clerk of the GA, and within 20 days from the adjournment do file such a minority decision, such minority decision shall be considered a minority report and shall be referred with the report of the SJC to the General Assembly. In each instance, file shall be understood as defined by the operating manual for Standing Judicial Commission, which, by the way, is another set of colored pages in the back of your Book of Church Order.
Hey, trivia question.
Yeah, come on.
How many times has there been a minority report from the SJC?
I'm guessing 0.
That's
One.
correct. 0.
Yeah, okay.
You know, what's interesting here is the time framing. It seems a little, I don't know, much, where you have to make known in 24 hours that you want to do a minority report, and then you have 20 days to file. I just don't understand why it needs to be that fleshed out thoroughly.
They want to know if they can alert the parties that there is a final decision.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's probably why it's quick, and you're going to know right away if you're that worked up about it.
And they're probably already talking about it. I'm sure the members of the commission among themselves know if there's going to be a minority coming.
That's true.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, here, we'll keep going. We'll talk in a second. 2, no such reference from the SJC, thank you, shall be considered by the General Assembly unless the report of the SJC and the minority report have been mailed to the clerk of session of each church at least 30 days prior to the meeting of the General Assembly. Jared, what does mailed mean? Help us younger guys out.
I don't know. It's they used to have these things that were like horses that took different parcels to different places. It was in the early days of Amazon. I think this
We're
is just
just
saying that if this happens within 30 days before General Assembly, you're not gonna. I mean, most people have decided whether or not they're going to General Assembly. You're going to know if there's a minority report coming from the SJC more than like a week before General Assembly is going to happen.
good.
Have you seen what they mail you when you do get something back from the SJC?
It's
No one's
crazy.
ever no one's gonna see it. But like this is what they send you.
This is about a 3 inch thick folder that Scott is holding up.
Yeah, I'm not gonna describe it at all for people listening. This is just for a party of two.
This is what they mail you.
They mail you 1,000
Nobody-
pages, and they're all bound really nicely with like metal framing and really high quality stuff here. But like, who's gonna read this in like 20 days?
Some people will. 3, the Assembly shall act upon such a reference from the SJC in each case without question, discussion, debate, or amendment as follows. The SJC shall have 30 minutes to present its decision to the Assembly. Then the minority shall have 30 minutes to present its decision to the Assembly. The Standing Judicial Commission shall have 10 minutes to reply to the minority report. Then the decision of the minority shall be proposed, and the GA shall, without question, discussion, debate, or amendment, approve or disapprove of the minority report. If the General Assembly disapproves the minority report, the General Assembly shall take up the decision of the SJC and, without question, discussion, debate, or amendment, approve or disapprove of the decision of the SJC. So, just to go back to Jared's little trivia earlier, this has never happened before, and this is. Now I'm wondering why we're reading all of this, but I'm still on board. I'm with you guys.
Well,
but
in 20 years, when this happens, someone's going to go back and find this episode and then try to figure out what's going to happen.
yeah, because it certainly won't be amended in the next 20 years. That's for sure.
We'll strike it all out.
Of course, I'm sure the first time it ever happens, we'll realize how wrong all of this is, and it'll be amended indefinitely the next several years. We'll have so many problems. 4, if the GA approves of a proposed decision, it shall be the decision of the General Assembly and printed in its minutes. There may be no complaint or appeal from such a final decision of the General Assembly. If the General Assembly finally disapproves of both proposed decisions, it must set the case for hearing before the General Assembly or a special commission appointed by it. And in either instance, the case shall be tried on the record as delivered to the stated clerk. Any such special commission shall then proceed to consider the case and shall report its decision in like manner to the GA for its approval or disapproval. In any event, the full record of the case, including written testimony of witnesses, all documents, exhibits, and papers shall be delivered to the stated clerk for permanent preservation.
Okay. Have any of you ever had an entire trial before your entire presbytery before?
No.
Okay. Just imagining that before the entire General Assembly just gives me nightmares.
So basically, they're laying out that, look,
Impossible.
if we approve what the SJC did, it's done. There's no appeal. You can't complain against it. It's just final.
Or the minority report.
Sure. Yeah. So whatever we approve, right, as the final judgment. But if we don't, then I kind of got lost in there. But we set a case for another hearing, right?
Yeah, either the GA can take it up or they could commission a commission, because you won't take the SJC since they bungled it. And so you
They'll be like,
commission.
look, maybe just take all of Ridge Haven and say, Ridge Haven, you guys can just try this and then come back and talk to us.
I was thinking more like this is more like the Pope of Avalon kind of thing where there are multiple popes. We have like multiple SJCs.
I mean, well, yeah, I don't even know how you would this has never happened, has it?
No.
Well, so
Okay.
this is why you would, one of the reasons you've heard before, there may be controversial cases. And I've talked to an SJC member before that says they often try to get as much of a majority that they can on a decision to prevent this from happening. So they're not going to make controversial decisions that result in a minority report. They're going to try to get as big of a consensus as they can so that this doesn't happen.
I mean, it would be a disaster. It'd be so expensive. Like just the expense side of things, it'd be a disaster.
Oh, man. All right. Last one is 15.6. The General Assembly shall have power to commit to a commission consisting of not less than 3 elders the task of forming a provisional presbytery in a foreign country where there exists no compatible indigenous Presbyterian and Reformed church. Such a commission shall have authority to act as the presbytery in all matters pertaining to the establishment and ordering of a national church and shall report annually to the General Assembly. The commission shall be dissolved when there are at least 3 national teaching elders and 3 organized churches under its care, and these shall then constitute a separate national church. So we've moved out of SJC, out of judicial commissions. We're talking about another kind of commission the GA has power to appoint, and it would not. So if you want to think about the parallel at the presbytery level, the presbytery can appoint a commission to act as a session of a church. And so similarly here, the GA has power to appoint a commission to act as a presbytery in certain scenarios. You guys had thoughts on this before we jumped into the whole recording, so I'll let you guys speak to those.
Yeah, Jared thinks that MTW is acting outside of our constitutional documents. That's what I think I heard earlier. Is that right, Jared?
Well, Morton Smith notes
He didn't say no.
Notes that MTW's manual has a bit of a different procedure, which doesn't really keep it under the umbrella of the PCA, but seems to seek to create another national church. And so they're doing something similar, but instead of being an extension of the PCA, it will become its own denomination. So I've heard of this happening in Southeast Asia, where they'll get a certain number of churches together, and once it gets to a place in where it looks like it can take off, instead of it just being a presbytery, it's its own denomination that we have some help in fashioning and forming it. But obviously not having them have to fly halfway across the world in order to attend their general assembly is probably more feasible for them just to have a national denomination that once they have a presbytery, then that can divide and it's its own group that we can have relations with rather than having control over them. Morton Smith actually suggests having this removed from the book, but it hasn't been yet.
Well, there you go. If you're bored and you need something to write into an overture, there's an option.
We'll consider at the 52nd General Assembly, since this is summer of 2024 right now, and we've already passed the 51st.
Yeah. Thank you to Scott for preserving the timelessness of polity matters. That's good. That's good. Want to make sure people don't get confused. Well, guys, any final thoughts on all of this? It is important to understand this. It seems like a lot of words to say, not very much, but the idea of commissions are significant to our polity. We see them at use a lot, and it's important for us to understand the value of the commission, but also the use of a commission, and especially in a presbytery level, whether we may want to move for committee instead, just depending on how much we want to deliberate on something.
A commission is an invaluable tool, but it can be overused. Don't overuse a commission to do the things that your presbytery probably just needs to do together and take the time to do. So it's an important tool, but it can be an overused tool.
Well, as an ecclesiastical commission, without question, discussion, debate, or amendment, would say, this podcast is over. Thanks for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about what we've talked about, check out the show notes. There's probably not very much for this episode, to be honest, but you can find those in your podcast player or at politymatters.org. If you've enjoyed the show, consider following us on Twitter and Facebook at Polity Matters, and be sure to subscribe in your podcast app of choice. If you've got questions or comments, you can find us on social media, and you guys know where to find us. We're out there. You can email us at politymattersfeedback@gmail.com. Next time, I would imagine we're going to be in BCO 16, but as far as when we're recording that, I don't know when it'll be, but I'm sure in time and space present here and now when you're listening, it will just be the next Tuesday morning that's coming around. We'll see y'all then. Thanks again for spending time with us. Until next time, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Y'all take care. Is Jared broken?
No.
What do you mean?
I just said goodbye.
Are you broken?